to have a chance to finish The Boy Who Loved Math. And while we do it, I'm going to be kind of practicing and modeling some of the strategies up there on the menu that you've seen already before. And as I do that, I may every now and then stop and see if you guys recognize the strategies. Some of them are strategies that each of you are practicing on your own. They're your kind of special strategies you've been practicing on your own during day 5. We'll see if you can spot them. If you remember, I think where we left off, Paul had just decided to not go to school anymore and stay home and study with Fraulein. I'll maybe overlap a little bit. I'll pick up here. We'll soon be in the new part of the story. But even Fraulein was better than school. Maybe 500 times better. Fraulein said Mama did everything for Paul. But Fraulein and Mama did everything for Paul. They cut his meat and buttered his bread and got him dressed and tied his shoes. That was great. It meant Paul could think about numbers all day. Numbers were his best friends. He could always depend on numbers, and they would always be there and behave in the same way. Numbers followed rules. He didn't like rules in life, but he liked rules in numbers. And so Paul turned 7 and 8 and 9, and when Paul was 10, he fell in love. Okay, so I'm going to stop and make sure I'm understanding what I'm reading here. So who's this about? Well, I know it's about Paul, and I know that he fell in love, but when he was only 10 years old, that doesn't make much sense, so...
Numbers.
Oh, you guys think he fell in love with numbers, maybe. Okay, well, let me move on. Let's see if I find out. He fell in love with prime numbers. Prime numbers are special. They can't be divided evenly. A prime number can be divided by itself in 1 only. The first prime number is 2. But that is only even prime number. And the other prime numbers are all odd. The numbers 3, 5, and 7 are prime. But not all odd numbers are prime. 9 isn't prime because you can multiply 3 times 3 and get 9. Okay, I better stop and see what I'm understanding what I'm reading again because I used a fancy word, prime numbers. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to see, I remember what a prime number is. Well, it says here a prime number is a number that can be divided only by itself in 1. So if I were going to make an array, it would only be a 1 in itself, right? Okay. Has anyone spotted the strategy I'm using yet? Go ahead, Aaron. What do you think? Ooh, so you kind of mix 2 to get there together, right? So I am kind of doing 2 of them at once. What am I doing, Bailey?
You're checking parameters
Mm-hmm.
and go back and read.
Brilliant. Those are 2 that I'm using that we use a lot when we're making sure we're understanding something. Very good thinking. Paul had a lot of questions about prime numbers. Do they go on forever? Is there a pattern to them? Why is it that the higher up you go, the farther apart the numbers are? Paul loved to think about prime numbers. By the time Paul was 20, he was already famous around the world for his math. People called him the magician from Budapest. But he still didn't know how to do his laundry, or cook his food, or butter his bread. That was not a problem. He still lived at home, and Mama still did everything for him. Even when he's 20, this is kind of like what we were just writing about. How do you know when you're grown up? Has Paul grown up yet? I don't know. But then one day, when Paul was 21, some mathematicians invited him to go to England to work on his math. Could he survive out in the world on his own? He rode the train by himself. He met mathematicians. They all went to dinner. Everyone else talked and ate, but Paul stared at his bread. He stared at his butter. He didn't know how to butter his bread. Finally, he took his knife and put some butter on it and spread it on his bread. Phew! He did it. It wasn't so hard, he said. Even though he could butter his own bread, Paul soon realized that he didn't fit in the world in a regular way. He wasn't the kind of person who could cook or clean or drive a car or have a wife and children. He wasn't the kind of person to live in one place or have one job. He wasn't the kind of person to do, he was the kind of person to do math all of the time. And he still didn't like to follow the rules. So he invented his own way to live. Here's what he did. Paul would get on an airplane with 2 small suitcases filled with everything he owned, a few clothes and some math notebooks. He might have $20 in his pocket or less. He flew to New York or Indiana and Los Angeles. He flew across the world from Toronto to Australia. I have no home, he declared. The world is my home. Ooh, that's kind of a fun word. Declared. Kind of even sounds nice in the back of my throat. Does anyone have any idea what declared means? It's one I might like to try and use in my reading and or my writing and when I'm talking a little more. Do you have an idea, AB?
Maybe decide, your last decision.
Kind of. Maybe he decided it out loud, right? Does anyone know what strategy I'm using when I find those interesting words and I decide, I'm going to try and use that more often? Do you know, Trenton?
Check for understanding.
Well, it's not exactly check for understanding. Some of you have been working on it on your own. Do you know, Maisha?
Hmm?
Do you know what it is? Some of you have word finders in your book boxes that you've been using.
Like these,
You might want to turn around and look at the menu. It's probably under expanding vocabulary. What? It's only close enough to read. What strategies do you see up there that might have something to do with finding those words that you think you're going to use more? Go ahead, Easton.
Tune in interesting words, use in new vocabulary in speaking and writing.
Aha! You found it. So that's the strategy. I'm tuning into interesting words. I might read it.
Take a picture.
So I'm videotaping this for my class because they want to see me teach a little bit, so they'll have to listen in a little bit, but it's just on me. So maybe the first thing we should do is I'd like to listen to you read a little bit and hear and see how you got along in the strategy that you were working on. Do you remember what that was? What was that strategy?
To read voraciously.
Yeah, and right, we're going to work on that one too, reading voraciously, but before that, what were you working on?
Question marks.
Yeah, we were really working on those questions, the punctuation, and making sure those question marks especially sound like questions. So I'll listen to you read for a little bit, and we'll just see how you're doing on that one, and then we'll go from there.
The famous Crazy was standing right next to me, live and in person. I can't take it anymore, Crazy. No, they're gonna tear me apart. I need somewhere to hide. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I had to think fast. So I did the first thing that came to my mind. I took off my pants. Quick, I said to Crazy, let's switch clothes. They'll never know the difference. Good idea, Crazy said.
There's a punctuation mark that we want to try and hit there. What is that one? How should your voice sound at the end of that one?
Let's switch clothes. They'll never know the difference.
Yeah, a little bit more forceful.
Good
right?
idea, Crazy said, taking off his pants. I tore off my itchy Christmas sweater and gave it to Crazy. He tore off his clothes and gave them to me. I put on the clothes and he put on mine. I looked pretty sharp with his hat and sunglasses. It was hilarious. Do I look like you?
Yes, got it. I was waiting for that question mark this whole time.
him.
Nicely done.
Yay, he said. Do I look like you? Yay. Yeah, I said, "You chill in here for a while. I'll take care of your fans for you."
I'm going to stop you there for now, Trinket, since we had a chance to hit a couple question marks. How do you think you're doing with that strategy?
Good.
I think so too. Those questions are sounding more and more like questions I can hear your voice rising at the end, and it's making the reader nicer to listen to and probably easier to understand too, right? So that's the strategy we had been working on. And what one did we choose last time? Do you remember?
Voracious reading.
Yeah, do you remember what voracious reading means?
Just read.
Yeah, it means read. So you're just reading the whole time. So when you're reading voraciously, a couple of things you need to make sure you've got books you like. It seems like you've got one, right? Do you have a couple other good ones in your book box?
I don't really know.
You don't? Okay. Why wouldn't you know?
Well, I haven't read them yet because I'm reading this
Oh,
book.
okay. And so if you're reading voraciously, there are a couple things I'm going to notice, and we'll check in about this. During Daily 5, when you're reading to self, you're reading the whole time, right? You're just devouring those books. So that's kind of one thing to work on, to make sure you choose a smart spot. Just read the whole time. And the other thing I'll probably notice is your reading log is going to be full, right? Every day you're reading, and you're bringing back saying that you read. So make sure if you've got books you really enjoy reading, and you're just reading, how do you think that will help you?
It will help me get better at the punctuations.
It probably will.
And it will get me more interested in books.
Probably, that's true. And I hope it makes that reading sound a little smoother and more expressive, kind of with the punctuation, and will help you with your fluency, is my guess. That's why it's up there under the fluency on our cafe menu. I'm going to give you a chance to keep reading. You can take this back to your book box, and we'll check in again next week. Maybe a little bit, but we'll check and see how you're doing with that strategy, and see we can kind of even mark where you were at today. I'll make a note of that you're on page 52, and if you're reading voraciously, you're probably going to make some progress in this book in the next week or so, right? Okay, so you can take that back to your spot. I might come check in with you in a bit. Thank you. Okay, so here I am back at home, and I've had a chance to review the videos and reflect on them a little bit. What we saw was 2 snippets from a sort of a reading workshop time that we do in the morning that's built on the ideas of 2 sisters by the name of Joan Moser and Gail Bushy, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing their names right, who've written the books The Daily 5 and The Cafe. And their basic approach is a mixture of small or whole group short mini lessons that model a variety of strategies that are up on a menu board, and those are either comprehension, accuracy, fluency, or expanding vocabulary strategies, making the acronym CAFE. And those are typically taught through modeling those strategies during a read aloud and then kind of thinking aloud through those strategies. Then each student tends to select their own strategy based on kind of what we know about them as a reader that they want to work on for a stretch of time, and then that's supported through individual conferences that a teacher has with those students, while the others in the class are doing one of 5 sort of daily literacy activities that they can do independently. And there are sometimes small strategy groups if a number of students are working on the same strategy. So what you saw in that short video, the first was a mini lesson on the carpet where I was actually kind of doing sort of a wrap up and reviewing a number of key strategies that the students are working on, and modeled those using a read aloud, and then kind of pulled the kids' suggestions on what strategies they thought I was modeling, and often the kids who knew were the kids who were working on that very strategy themselves. Then the second part you saw was a individual conference with one student who had been working on 2 fluency strategies. One was using punctuation to kind of change voice and inflection, and the other one was what the menu calls reading voraciously, which just is essentially their way of encouraging students to read, and think of that as a strategy that helps them with their fluency. This approach is pretty naturally differentiated in a couple of ways. First of all, every student is reading student-selected books that should be at an instructional level. So the level of reading is differentiated,
It's also differentiated in that each student is selecting different strategies based on what's going to help them most as a reader. Some students are working on comprehension strategies. Maybe those are kids who read really accurately but aren't understanding what they're reading. Some kids are working on fluency strategies, and so on and so forth, and that changes fairly regularly. I've also, as I meet with those individual students, these same two sisters have put out a really nice online conferencing log called the CC Pensive, so you can keep track of all your notes, which is a lifesaver for me because I don't remember from time to time really what I've done exactly and what the kids are exactly working on, what steps we've taken, so I can quick look at my log and I know, okay, yeah, this is where we're at, and can go from there. And that's one challenge I could see doing this. I'm only conferencing with about 8 kids right now. Doing that with a whole class of students, really keeping track would be tough, and finding the time to meet regularly with the kids who need it and really have a chance to check in with all the kids I would have to be more efficient with my time than I am now. A second thing I've noticed is that right now that I'd like to work on is right now a lot of the time we're choosing strategies based on some data from Dibble's tests and mostly on anecdotal notes and observations about whether a student should really be working on comprehension strategy or maybe fluency or maybe accuracy, but it's not particularly data driven. Sometimes it's done almost at a whim, or the student's just going to choose, sometimes based on what they've heard most recently. And that's something I would like to work on, having more specific reading assessment data that I can use to say, this is really exactly what this student should be working on at this time. And I think that could make the differentiation a little crisper, where I have a chance to use this same approach in a classroom in the future. I think that pretty well covers my kind of thoughts and observations on the matter, and it really is something I'm excited about and have read a lot about and hope to be able to use in the future.